Okay. I think this is telling for a new college student, but I am extremely excited for our next and final speaker because, of course, I have a favorite academic. Our next speech will come from our keynote speaker, Viet Thanh Nguyen. I would like to start out his introduction by emphasizing how fitting this moment is for our student body. In discussing new commencement with my peers, many lit up with excitement at the prospect of hearing Dr. Nguyen speak. As a graduate of UC Berkeley, he has spent his career writing on the Vietnamese and Greater Asian diaspora in America through fiction and nonfiction. His most recent book, released this year, is titled To Save and to Destroy, Writing as an Other. In all of his work, he explores the themes of hyphenated identity, isolation, and war, but also joy, community, and the complicated sense of home. Although his work is specific to the experience of Asian Americans, he teaches lessons that anyone who has been displaced can relate to and feel seen by. For his renowned novel, The Sympathizer, he has won the Dayton Literary Peace Prize, the Carnegie Medal for Excellence in Fiction, the Pulitzer Prize, and many more. However, it is not just for this list of credentials that makes Dr. Nguyen so special. It is his commitment, despite looking at the past, to continue moving forward. Please welcome Dr. Viet Thanh Nguyen.
Am I supposed to stand on this? Sorry about that little misstep, literally. Thank you so much for that introduction. That was fabulous. Good evening, New College. Such a pleasure and an honor to be here with you today on this very special day of gratitude and hope and relief. Congratulations, graduates, on your wonderful accomplishment. Congratulations, parents, on the even more wonderful accomplishment of raising young adults like these. This is a happy day, but honestly, one that always leaves me with mixed emotions. For as I look out upon all these optimistic, youthful, unlined faces ready to embark on their life's journey, I'm reminded, once again, that I am more than halfway to death. I think I'm here today partly because I wrote a novel called The Sympathizer, which HBO turned into a TV series last year. Which means that if you haven't read The Sympathizer yet, you never have to read The Sympathizer. You can just watch it on TV. That won't hurt me because I'm a writer and I live in Los Angeles. When I tell people in LA that I'm a writer, no one cares. I'm used to it. I was an English major and an ethnic studies major. People would always ask, what are you going to do with an English major or an ethnic studies major? None of the answers I gave likely satisfied anybody. Reading, writing, teaching, the acts of the humanities might have all seemed rather modest to people only interested in making money. Yet the humanities have always mattered, now more than ever for many reasons. But the one I'm focusing on tonight is about finding your voice. This is what a lifetime in the humanities has taught me. But no matter what career you envision for yourself, you'll need to find your voice. My journey to finding my voice and becoming a writer started when my family arrived in the United States in 1975 as refugees, fleeing the end of the war in Vietnam. Being a refugee was quite traumatic, but it wasn't all bad. Being a refugee left me with the requisite emotional damage necessary to become a writer. Being a refugee also leaves me with an opinion that not everyone in this country agrees with, which is that I think refugees and immigrants make America great. Speaking of greatness, my older brother was 10 years old when he came here, speaking no English. 7 years later, he graduated as valedictorian of his high school and went to Harvard. Then, just to make my life harder, he went to Stanford Medical School, which is what you're supposed to do when you're Asian. I'm very proud of my brother, but I don't think our refugee and immigrant policy should be based on whether refugees or immigrants can become doctors, lawyers, engineers, or even writers. You shouldn't have to be exceptional to be let into this country. I, for one, believe in a United States that is equal for all, where refugees and immigrants have the right to be mediocre just like every other American. Society, and maybe your parents, tells you that you should not be mediocre. I'm here to give you permission to fail. Your parents might not want to hear that, but you should listen to Samuel Beckett. Ever tried, he wrote. Ever failed? No matter. Try again. Fail again. Fail better. I failed a lot as I tried to find my voice, and I'll give you just one example. My first creative writing workshop at the University of California at Berkeley with the writer Maxine Hong Kingston. Every day, I would enter her seminar of 14 students, sit a few feet away from her, a writer whose book, The Woman Warrior, was reputed to be the most widely taught book on college campuses, and every day, I would fall asleep. Professor Kingston gave me a B+, which may not seem that bad, except that a B+ is an Asian F. No one thought I had the talent to be a writer, but I never gave up. Over the next 20 years, I failed again and again and again. If you're one of those people who's never failed at anything, who's never fallen asleep in class, who's always been good at what you do, I hate you. We all do. For the rest of us who have failed, the lesson is persistence is more important than talent. Over 20 years, I persisted. I spent about 10,000 hours alone in a room trying to be a writer. If you spend 10,000 hours doing anything, you'll be good at it. Maybe not great, but good. The challenge is finding something you care enough about to spend 10,000 hours doing it. Try to find that one thing that inspires that much passion in you. Expect failure along the way. Forgive yourself for failing, realizing that failing can be learning. Each time I failed, I was one step closer to finding my voice. That was important to me because I grew up when the United States was fighting its war in Vietnam all over again, this time on screen. I watched almost all of Hollywood's Vietnam War movies, an exercise I recommend to no one, especially if you're Vietnamese. Our only place in American movies was to be killed, raped, threatened, or rescued. Like many other so-called minorities, we were distorted by stereotypes or erased by ignorance. The solution for many of our parents was to make their children doctors, lawyers, engineers, just not writers, or artists, or actors, or musicians, or dancers. But as Maxine Hong Kingston has written, we need more than necessity. We also need extravagance. We need beauty. We need the humanities. We need the liberal arts. We need our artists and creators and storytellers too. As I tried to become a storyteller and find my voice, I worried about whether I was pleasing people, including editors, reviewers, readers, and not least of all, my parents. As a result, my voice was somewhat muted out of fear. With The Sympathizer, a novel about the war in Vietnam, where the Vietnamese are at the center of our own story, I was done worrying about what others thought about me. I wrote that novel first and foremost for me. And by not caring about what other people thought, I found my authentic voice. But I ran into a problem. The first major review of the novel said that Viet is a voice for the voiceless. And I thought, no. Have you ever met any Vietnamese people? Eaten at a Vietnamese restaurant? Been inside a Vietnamese home? We're really, really loud. As Arundhati Roy puts it, there's really no such thing as the voiceless. There are only the deliberately silenced or the preferably unheard. What I want for each of you graduates is to reach that moment of absolute authenticity when you discover your voice. Perhaps you have a sense of your voice and your truth now. I suggest that you write yourself a letter, telling yourself what you believe in and what you want to be. Not just what kind of job you want to have, but what kind of person and human being you envision yourself becoming. Put that letter away. Come back to it in 30 years, when you will be more than halfway to death. And see whether you've become who you wanted to be or whether you betrayed yourself. I have tried not to betray my younger self, the 21-year-old who graduated from UC Berkeley with 2 majors, 3 degrees, and 4 misdemeanors. 2 counts of resisting arrest, 2 counts of trespassing. In those days of the early 90s, my cohort were political activists. I felt a little embarrassed about my political activity, however, because looking back to the 1960s, the Berkeley activists were protesting the Vietnam War. In the 1980s, the Berkeley activists were protesting apartheid. In the early 1990s, we were asking for greater curricular and faculty diversity. Not quite the same ring. And yet, now we realize that the culture wars of the early 1990s foreshadow the culture wars of today. And if we were fighting for diversity back then, diversity has now become part of that unholy trinity: diversity, equity, and inclusion. The so-called culture wars are real wars, and they are tied to the actual and imagined wars that our country is fighting or supporting today. When I think back to my younger self, I think I would have spoken out on some of the most important issues of my time back then, which has led me to try to speak out on some of the most important issues of our time today. This is why I often advocate for refugees and immigrants, including writing for Time magazine a few weeks ago, disagreeing strongly with our government renditioning immigrants without due process to a brutal prison in El Salvador. That is wrong. Trying to be true to my younger self is also why I signed a letter demanding a ceasefire, along with 750 other writers and artists, in October 2023, and why I have been vocal in support of students who are being arrested, imprisoned, and threatened with deportation simply for using their free speech to say that they believe Israel is committing a genocide in Gaza. Those students include Mahmoud Khalil, still in prison in Louisiana. They include Logan Rozos, who used his NYU graduation speech to speak out against genocide. NYU is threatening to pull back his diploma. These students and many others inspire me and humble me with their courage during this time when our universities and colleges have once again become a part of the culture wars. The hollowness of too many of our academic institutions is more and more evident during a time when it is ever more urgent to break silence and to speak our conscience. What gives me hope are the students, including the student I once was and the students you are now. I would never want to be your age again. But what I have tried to remember from that time was the idealism, the conviction, the possibility of doing the impossible, the fearlessness. This memory of my 21-year-old self helped my middle-aged self to find his voice. I hope that when you find your own voice, that you do not try to be a voice for the voiceless. Instead, your challenge and mine is to listen for unheard voices, to abolish the conditions of voicelessness, and to break our silence. This is how we change our individual stories as well as the collective story of this country, expanding it so that our country's story excludes no one and includes everyone. Lastly, parents. I haven't forgotten about you. Don't discourage your children from finding their voices, even if they're different than yours. Let them be extravagant. And for those parents with artistically inclined children, I have a special appeal. Encourage your artists and actors and dancers and singers, for they bring beauty to the world, and there is nothing more necessary than beauty. Nurture your poets and writers and storytellers so that one day they will find their authentic voices and finally sit down to write scathing memoirs featuring you. Class of 2025, it's all over, and yet it's all just beginning. I hope we hear your voices in the future, and I hope we hear your voices now. Congratulations.